Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to In the Zone. I'm here. My name is Rich Sutter, and I'm here with my man, Pete Coles. Excuse me. We're starting off with a little froggy already, Pete.
It's a change in weather. It's back and forth. It can't make up its
It's
mind.
the change in the season, I think.
Yeah.
And so we're here with Pete, and we are ready to rock and roll on episode 8 of In the Zone. It's astonishing.
Can you believe it?
It's astonishing to me that this is episode 8. I think 7 went really, really well. And before we go into any of the basketball stuff that we have laid out for you today, I just wanted to make mention of Pete because he really is. I gave him the nickname MVP. But going back to last week's show, when I got a chance to watch that, I was really impressed with Pete's abilities because I never give Pete any heads up on what we're doing.
Yep.
And so the graphics that he was pulling last week's were just pulled, and I could tell you maybe where they were pulled from, but they weren't pulled from me. They weren't given to Pete by me, so they were just pulled on the fly. Amazing, amazing display of his skill last week, so I just wanted to start off the show and make mention of that. Thanks, Pete. You're amazing, and you do a great job over here.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start you off with a little bit of a quasi quiz, okay?
All right.
Some people describe Michael Jordan as the greatest player in basketball. So I wanted to read you some facts about Michael Jordan, which certainly present a resume, present a credential for him as one of the greatest players of all time. Absolutely no question. But when you go through it and then you start to compare GOAT, as they say, the greatest of all time, I think this is a really interesting look. And I'm going to keep the second side of this anonymous, Pete, and I'm going to ask you to guess who the other person is.
Okay.
So right now we're going to go through Michael Jordan and his list of accomplishments. Michael Jordan was an 11-time All-NBA player. Michael Jordan was a 14-time All-Star. He won 6 titles in his career, 32,000 points scored over that, 6,000 rebounds over, 5,000 assists, 28 triple-doubles in his career, and his finals record is 6-0. Okay?
Okay.
Now I'm going to read you the other side, but I'm going to let the person remain anonymous, and I'm going to ask you to guess who it is. As we move through, it's going to be difficult to find out who it is, but I'm going to offer you some hints as we go.
Okay.
Okay? This gentleman, 11-time All-NBA, 13-time All-Star, 8 titles, 26,000 points, 8,000 rebounds, 6,000 assists, 31 triple-doubles, and has an 8-0 finals record. Tell me who that other
8-0.
player is.
Larry Bird.
Great guess, but it's not Larry Bird.
Okay.
You have the right team.
Oh. Kevin McHale?
Kevin McHale, another good guess, but no.
Further back?
Further back.
Oh, what's the player?
One of my all-time favorites.
I'm trying to think.
Had a nickname.
And I could probably, I think I'm picturing his face, but
Those are the stats of John Havlicek
really?
of the Celtics. Those are the numbers
Wow.
of one of the NBA players that probably never gets consideration to be considered into the greatest of all time. And when you compare his numbers to Michael Jordan side by side, really, really kind of staggering. So I thought that was an interesting way to go out, and I wanted to present that with you. And then, again, conversation piece as we go. What I did was I broke the week down because what I wanted to do this week was I wanted to bring the fan base in a little bit. We have some people that are interested in the show. And what I did was I went out on my social media sites and I put down a couple of requests and solicitations for questions along the basketball frame. So I got a number of them and some really, really good ones. There were a few that I thought were a little too controversial for the show. So I excluded those for the show today. But I did pick 16 of them. So, Pete, we can go through that first, or do you want to save the questions for last? The rub being some of the people sending the questions might want to see their questions on air. And so, therefore, if we really want to give it to them, we give it to them up front. If we want to make them wait through the whole show so they have to watch the whole show, we put it at the end.
That's up to you, man. You're the host of this deal. You want to tease them a little?
Let's put them up front.
All right.
Let's do the right thing and we'll put them up front. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about. A whole lot of things going on in the NBA right now. That's a whole hour into itself. But there were some great questions that we got from people, and so we'll go through them. We're going to give some mention of the person's name, and then we're going to read the question, and then I'm going to do my best to answer it. I thought some of the questions were really, really deep and interesting. Some of them were based around basketball rules. Some of them were based around the current setup of the game, and some of them, are going to pique your interest a little bit. So this one, the first one, and I took them. Most of them in the order that they came to me was from a gentleman, and I don't know a lot of these people. They just came in on social media. So the number one was from Kurt Vialet. I hope I'm saying his name right. It's Vialet. Very nice sounding name. I don't know if I pronounced it the correct way. His question is, if the athletes of today are more athletic and have the ability to be in shape all year long, then why are they getting hurt more often than the older players and the athletes before them? Good question.
Can I postulate on that one?
Go for it.
I'm hearing this a lot about high school athletes. Because they're only playing one sport, they're only working out certain sets of muscles and musculoskeletal sections. If they're not playing more than one kind of sport, they're not getting that well-roundedness, and that leads to injuries because they're overworking those one muscle groups and things like that.
I could go in on that 100%. 100%. I think you could also piggyback on it a little bit is with the amount of games that players are playing these days, because that's the most strenuous form of basketball. But if you look at an AAU schedule in a day, when these young men are in high school, they're playing, like 4 and 5 games per day on an AAU circuit at a tournament so that they can be watched by college coaches. And I'm not sure exactly how healthy that is. I think you would benefit your time a lot better because we all pretty much have the same amount of time in the day. But I think young players coming up would benefit themselves as players by cutting down on the amount of actual game time and really starting to work on their skill, and the most important skill being shooting. But I think the injury numbers, I would like to also throw in the fact that you have a situation in the NBA especially, you don't see this in college basketball at all, but you see it in the NBA where they have what's called load management. And it's this thing that's popped up recently in the NBA where they cut down the number of games. And I think you saw a fairly significant amount of load management going on in LA so that Anthony Davis and LeBron James could walk into this playoff healthy and spry. And I think looking at them right now, I think that paid off. I don't know how fair that is to the fans, but I think some of the injury stuff that you're seeing also is under the heading of load management, where player might not be so much hurt, but it's a mental day off. It's a physical day off that'll allow them to
get them out of the grind, right?
And get better to get them out of the grind. Yeah. So I think that's a great question. Let's move on to number 2. Okay, we have this one coming from Charlie Butera. Again, I don't know Charlie, but this was a great question. Similar to the one that was asked before. Why, if the athletes today are more superior than decades ago, why has the NBA made it easier for them by not calling palming, traveling violations, moving picks, and why do they need what we just discussed? And Charlie asked this question, why do they need load management? So that's a great question, and I think
you see so much traveling nowadays.
It's ridiculous in the NBA.
Five steps to a dunk?
I saw somebody pick up a basketball one time, put it underneath their arm at like half court, and get all the way to the rim with it, and nobody called a travel on them. I think it's unbelievable. I think there's a fouling disparity that goes on in the NBA as well, too. The more established players get treated to a different set of rules. And we can talk about that maybe in greater detail today. Because when you talk about like John Havlicek's numbers, and you talk about Michael Jordan's numbers, and now we talk about LeBron's numbers, the NBA has been involved in manufacturing their game or marketing their game in a certain way for a very, very long time. And some of the things that you have to incorporate when you look at the players who played in previous generations was, did they play with illegal defense? when the NBA implemented illegal defense, they made certain parts of defense illegal. I know that wasn't basketball people who came up with that. They modified it and they went to what was called a defensive 3 seconds, which means your big man or whoever just couldn't sit in the lane and not cover his man. Again, a ridiculous basketball portrayal, a ridiculous way to aspect basketball, and it was just terrible. And then they put in the no hand check rule much later as well. So as you're looking at the players in today, they are playing in a different game than the players did in the past. And you go back to Isaiah Thomas, and he's been talked about a little bit in that Chicago Bulls, trying to keep him off the Olympic team and stuff like that. He took about 50 or 60 stitches in his head one time and came back and played in the game. So I do agree with a little bit of the premise of Charlie's question that the players are far superior today than they were in the past. I think there was a lot of tremendous athletes in the game in the past. David Thompson, Michael Jordan, Julius Erving, George Gervin. Those guys were unbelievably great athletes, players, and I think you have the same thing today. I don't think there's much of a difference in that. I do think that the load management and the way they're being handled these days is a little bit different. And some of these gentlemen play 4 years of college. Some of them play 3, 2, and 1, and that has a difference as well too, because that's the amount of toll it takes on your body during that thing. I'll go out on a limb right here in the zone. I'm going to offer NBA players, I'm going to offer every single one of them a piece of advice. Don't ever dunk the basketball.
Really?
Your bodies are worth millions of dollars.
Okay.
That is how you apply your trade. And to go up in the air and fly all over the place. I know it looks great and the fans love it and all that good stuff, but if I was not in traffic and I was out there by myself and I didn't have to go in forcefully and dunk the ball, I'd never do it, because the landings on the knees and all of the other stuff takes its toll over time. And so what you're doing is you're degrading the only thing that you have working for you, which is your body. And that's the greatest part of that's one of your greatest attributes, is your body. And so I think when you go out there and intentionally kind of tear it up and destroy it, I really don't understand that. But in certain situations, I like the dunk and different things like that. But if I got to the NBA level and I'm in there on a breakaway, I'm just going to lay it in and run back on defense, because I know it's not going to take a toll on my body, and I get the same points that I do if I lay it in or if I dunk the ball.
And beyond the physical aspects of it, we're seeing now more that players are in it for themselves, not in it for the teams like they were back in the day. So all these players were really team members. There might have been stars, but they weren't stars in the sense that they are now. Like, these guys are out for themselves.
It was a different game.
It was a way different game.
It was a different game. It was more team-driven. It was more heavily coached. LeBron James hasn't had a coach that's been an authority figure with him in years.
Right.
They bring in coaches, and basically he's running the team, and I don't think that that's great either. I think Vogel right now, the coach on the Lakers, has done a pretty good job of mediating that as best of any coach in a really long time. I think most of the people that have been around LeBron James most of his career have just been people that have been telling him exactly what he wants to do and what he wants to know.
Game managers.
And have just been sycophantic in their approach to him, and I think that's hurt his career a little bit.
They're game managers. They're not coaches.
No. I agree. All right, Chris King up at number 3. He says, the day Kyle Filipowski decided to return to Duke, Mackenzie Mabako decided to decommit from Duke. The transfer portal is full of guys who did not earn their role at their respective schools. Is this because of a lack of competitive fire, or players searching for the best deal in their career going forward? Chris King, great question. I think it's a combination of things, but I think it's always people looking for the best deal. I think people are going to always look to better themselves, but I think what's going on right now, we've talked about a lot on this show. The portal is unhealthy. NIL is unhealthy for college basketball. It's gotten out of control. Somebody needs to step up and change it. I don't know who that somebody is. Okay, so
I have one quick answer on that one.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
I think that's a great. You're making me laugh now, because that's what makes the world go round these days, it seems. And the integrity. You can make a ton of money, but you didn't have to hand up the integrity of it as well. I agree with that 100%. Okay, number 4 comes from Robert Normandia Jr. Is taking an offensive foul a lost art? I don't believe it's a lost art. I think it's been intentionally driven out of the game by the powers that be. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. When you look at the basketball court, now you see a circle under the basket, which tells them there's a zone where you can take an offensive foul and there's a zone where you're not permitted to take an offensive foul. They also have, at least in the college ranks, what's called a primary defender and a secondary defender. And if you can explain that to me on any level, when the game's going up and down or the team's playing zone, I don't understand how you can explain that one to me, but that's what they have as well. So the art of taking a charge, I think, has been eliminated from the game. In the college game, you'll still see it, especially in the NCAA tournament and at big moments. We try and do our best to teach it. I think our players are fairly open to it. But again, we've had players that have come out. I think it was Kobe, comes out and says, I flat out don't take charges. And that was similar for the reason which I said that NBA players shouldn't dunk. Kobe Bryant didn't think he should be putting his body in front of guys that are 260 pounds running full speed down the court and getting run over by them. So I think also better defense keeps you out of those situations. But I think it is a lost art, but I think the art was taken out. I don't think the art was just given up. I think when they put that circle in there, it was terrible. I'll tell you why the circle's terrible too, because what it does is it does something which is a complete in familia, if you will, to the game from where I'm from in the Bronx, okay? The worst thing you could do in a schoolyard was to low bridge somebody while they were up in the air, just to go underneath the guy and cut his legs out from underneath him, and that was what they called a low bridge. It was the worst thing you can possibly do. Now, by rule, the players have to move up and step out of that zone and move up towards the player who's already in the air. And that's when you're low bridging guys by definition, and I don't like it. I think you can take a charge anywhere out on the floor, primary defender, secondary defender. This is what I'm talking about a little bit about basketball. It's gone crazy.
Sounds like a little word salad, gobbledygook.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of people that aren't basketball people that sit around in a room and come up with this stuff to justify their jobs, and it's disheartening at times. This one comes from Bob Israel, Pete. How dominant would a player be if they were in a situation where they were able to go right from college to the pros? How dominant could that player be? And I think it changes the question of they don't have to be dominant. The question is, can they get a contract? Can they get something that makes living for their family better than what they have? The NIL deal is a way around that a little bit, but that's not healthy either. So we're into two healthy behaviors there. I don't think either one of them is good. Question number 6 comes from Robert Brimat. This gentleman I know. I believe he was a all-state wrestling champion in high school. Robbie Brimat, also a good basketball player, as was his brother Michael back in the Bronx. And he's a conspiracy theorist a little bit here, Bobby. Okay. He says, will the Golden State Warriors series be fixed in their favor once again this year?
Ooh, interesting charge.
That's a deep one, and I think people have had questions about the NBA's integrity for a number of years, going back to when they implemented the lottery and some other pieces, which kind of tend to place a little bit of direction on where the best players are going and where they wind up. And generally, you'll see Michael Jordan in Chicago, Shaquille and Kobe out in L.A., Patrick Ewing wound up in New York. The major market areas usually get fed. And if they don't get fed, well, then they just do trades and different stuff like that, so they wind up there. But that's the way it's always kind of been. Joe Mead with number 7. How has the three-point line changed the game for coaches? Do you think it was a positive change? Coaches don't want to cover any more area than they have to with their defense, and so that stretched the floor. It made things a little bit more difficult. I think it also helped the coaches defensively as well, though, because now shot selection's bad. Shot selection's terrible. You have everybody thinks they're a three-point shooter right now. It's terrible. All right, this one comes out of Arizona. Stephen Boyle. Who was and is your favorite player? Okay, was Larry Bird, is Steph Curry. This one comes from his brother Marty Boyle. Is LeBron going to the free throw line every time someone touches him? And in answer to Bob Brimat's question about the Golden State Warriors, if you looked at the first game of the Lakers and the Warriors, you'll see that the Lakers had a 20-point differential on the free throw line over the Warriors. Okay, so maybe there was a time when the NBA was hoping the Warriors would get there. The Warriors may have found themselves on the flip side of that with the NBA hoping for the Lakers. I don't know. Okay, former player from Colgate, Steve Benton. The greatest venue or game you experienced as a coach. Best college player and coach of all time. Wow, that's a great one.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, so the greatest venue for me, I was in Madison Square Garden with the Colgate team that we had there. Greatest venue of all time. And I think as a coach, also, when we were city champions, we played at Fordham University with Archbishop Malloy, and we won the city championship that year with Kenny Anderson, Rob Wardan, and Ralph James. So I think that would probably be up there.
I think around here, when you played Western Mass, if you got to Western Mass, you played in the cage up at UMass
Oh,
before they
that's
had the
huge.
Mullins Center.
It's huge.
And that was just a cool environment to play a game in.
So when you want to talk about the New York City Catholic High School League championship, the city championship, you
Yep.
take the cage up there and you amplify it by 10 times.
Oh yeah.
It's
But I mean,
amazing.
for around here, that was the play. If you made it to the cage and you're playing where UMass played at the time, that was awesome.
Best college player and best college coach of all time. I guess I'm going to go with my favorite. I'm going to say my favorite college player was Pistol Pete Maravich. And I'll say the greatest coach of all time, I'm going to stay with my guy Pete Carrill. He never had a bye game. Ian Gitchell, number 11. Your thoughts on NBA rising star Taylor Hendricks from UCF? He has come on like Jalen Williams from Santa Clara. Okay, that's a great question. We had him number 3. We're very high on him. I like the young man. He's 6'10". He can do a lot of things, and I really, really think he's terrific. Okay, Laura Danielle, who has the most dunks this season? That's an interesting question. I had to look this up. Evan Mobley from the Cleveland Cavaliers has 173 dunks.
Wow.
Jarrett Allen, also from the Cleveland Cavaliers, has 163 dunks. If you take Mobley's games and divide it, it comes out to 2.18 dunks. But if you take Jarrett Allen's games and divide it, it comes out to 2.3. Rudy Gobert was in the 3-hole, and Giannis Antetokounmpo coming in at number 4. I can't believe the NBA has such great stats like that. Okay, Tom O'Connor, number 13. Is Bobby Hurley a better coach or a better player? I don't think you can have any consideration about that. He's a better player than he was a coach, showed right now. I think you can say the opposite about his brother, maybe. His brother's probably a better coach than he was a player. James Lutz, what former Hall of Fame Knicks coach both the Knicks and the Nets? Jimmy is somebody I know from back home in St. Gabriel's, and I probably should have looked up the answer to that. I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was Willis Reed, but I'm not sure about that. Okay, Mike Ryan. How come nobody uses a full court press anymore? Interesting question. They haven't done it a lot in college. They haven't done it at all in the pros. I think the pros might have outlawed it. With 24-second clock, if you were pressing somebody, I'm not sure you're allowed to do it in the pros. I think you probably are at some level, maybe man-to-man or something like that, be able to pick up, but I'm not 100% sure. So that was a great question.
By the way, you're correct. Willis Reed played for the Knicks, coached the Knicks, and coached the Nets to finish out his career.
One of my favorite players of all time. Him coming out of the tunnel in Game 7 versus the Lakers is the most seminal moment in sports history. Take that one for all you other fans of football and baseball. The captain coming out of the tunnel was just amazing. Okay, last one. Michael Wolff. This is a basketball rule question. Can a player pass the ball to another player while they're both out of bounds, baseline, to break a press? And the answer to that, Michael, is yes, they can. We call it step out. And so the player on the floor can step out of bounds, and the player already out of bounds holding the ball can pass the ball to that person down the line. And, of course, the ball isn't inbounded. Now, if you did do that and you passed the ball down the line and you threw it to another teammate, the player who passed the ball, can he now step in and catch the inbounds pass? And the answer to that is yes, they can do that. It's called step-out play for us, and I think it's a good play. I think more coaches should use it because when you're being pressed full court like that, the players are so big, so athletic, and you're trying to get the ball in such a really, really small area. You've seen some coaches go to where they're taking all of their players and putting them out of bounds and then running them in and then having one player left open, and it's pretty interesting to see that happen.
I have a question. If you pass from one player out of bounds to another player out of bounds, does the 5-second count still continue to inbound the ball?
Count's still on.
Okay.
And he can pass the ball back to the player who's out of bounds as well. So
Right,
if
but you have to get it in bounds within 5 seconds.
still got to come in bounds within 5 seconds, but you can patty cake it back and forth between two players as long as you want.
Okay.
I'd really like to know if you could put 3 players on that baseline and allow them to all touch the ball. I think that would be an interesting question. All right, so I got some dates for you here, Pete. We're moving along here at an unbelievable clip. We have some dates here, and this is where I want to include our top 4 players from outside the draft that we didn't talk about last week. I want to put them in and talk about them a little bit right now, but I also want to talk about a couple of dates, because as much as we're going to talk about these young men right now, I am going to ask for a little bit of lenience on this, because some of these dates that are coming up are going to be impactful dates. They're going to have G League Combine. They're going to have the NBA Combine. Those are going to be opportunities for me to watch and then report back to you what I'm seeing in the Combines against the best of the best, which is the real, true proving ground for this thing. I think we talked about Scottie Pippen, absolutely meteoric rise within the Combine camps. And so here's a couple of dates that you might want to keep on your radar and put them into your calendar, because they're good dates, and they're going to give you an idea to see everybody who's approaching in this draft. So May 13th and 14th is the G League Elite Camp. And that's where you'll see Scoot Henderson, who I have down as number 1 of all the 4 that we have outside. May 15th through the 21st, this is going to be really good this year as well, too, is the NBA Draft Combine. They're both in Chicago. May 31st is the NCAA early entry withdrawal deadline. June 12th is the NBA early entry withdrawal deadline. And then on June 22nd, you'll have the NBA draft. So I think those are some important dates coming up. Let's talk quickly, Pete, about the top 4 that we have. Scoot Henderson, Amen and Ausar Thompson, and also Victor Wembanyama. I know everybody has Victor Wembanyama as the number 1. I want to go out on a limb right now and say that I would probably draft Scoot Henderson before I would draft Victor Wembanyama. But we also did make a prediction on last week's show, and I'm going to stick with that prediction, that when the NBA does their jumble of all of the teams that are in the lottery and then selects who has the number 1 through number 5 pick, where the rest of them just fall out, I think you're going to see the Toronto Raptors emerge with that pick, and I think you're going to see Victor Wembanyama. And that's a conspiracy theory for you, going way back to when the Knicks in the very first draft had Dave DeBusschere come on, and they got the number 1 pick and drafted Patrick Ewing in that draft. But I think the Thompson twins, we've talked about them a little bit, Amen and Ausar Thompson, they have NBA skill level. They have NBA frames as well. They're both 6'9", 6'10". They possess skills that can go inside or outside. Their wingspan is tremendous. I do question, as the same thing I'm putting up on a big question mark with Victor Wembanyama, is the strength level of these young men. They're on the thin side, but that hasn't hurt Kevin Durant. That hasn't hurt a lot of really strong players in the NBA. So I do want to watch some of these gentlemen a little bit more. But again, Wembanyama is from France, so I don't think he makes the G League Combine. Scoot Henderson will be there, hopefully, most likely. But if he's the number 1 pick, there's no encumbrance on him to be there. With the Thompson twins, they play in a different type of league. I don't know where you're going to find them. So you have to see. I doubt that they'll come to the NBA Combine. That would be, it's risky. It's risky. So I think, if you're already slated to be number 1, there's kind of a thought process behind that of saying you could go in there and hurt yourself and wind up number 2, 3, 4, or 5 if you don't play well. So if they already have you slated as number 1 and it goes the way that I think it's going to go, then I think you're going to have him be drafted number 1. And then as we go forward, after I get a chance to look at those guys a little more, right as we come up on June, we're going to shuffle these guys into our draft and redo our first round over again. So we can look at Zach Edey and Brandon Miller and some of these young men up against the gentlemen that are coming into this frame right now. I would have loved to seen the Thompson twins play in the NCAA, because I think they do possess a very high skill level. But it's important for me to watch people go against what we consider at least the best of the best. So we're moving through our cards at an unbelievably rapid pace here today, Pete, but I did want to jump into the NBA playoffs real quick and what we have going on there right now. So I've done 2 things also this week to raise some conversation points around and to talk about. But the 2 things that I did this week was I took all of the coaches that are remaining in the NBA playoff situation, and I took one player from each team that I think is doing great things at this very, very moment, and maybe the best things for their team. And then I took all 8 of those players and I put them into rank order just like I did the coaches. So let's grab the coaches first, okay? I did it East Coast, I did it West Coast, and then I combined all of them.
All right, let's start in the East then.
We'll start in the East. And so in the East, you have, in our number 1 spot, we have Eric Spoelstra from the Miami Heat. I think he's done a great job. When Eric Spoelstra first became the coach of the Miami Heat, I was not a big fan of his. He's a survivor. He's really, really advanced as a coach and grown as a coach in my mind. And I think right now, when I'm watching games and I'm watching that go on, I think right now that he probably has the best offensive mind in the East Coast as far as offense goes. I really like what they're doing with Jimmy Butler and some of their other players. So I think that I'm going to lay him as be our number 1 East Coast playoff coach right now. Number 2, I have Doc Rivers from the 76ers. Doc Rivers has been around, I don't know how many different teams he's coached, but he's been around a really long time. He has a tremendous amount of experience. He's been through this before. I don't know if they're going to get past the Celtics, but that's a battle royale going on right now that we'll talk about a little bit later. Thibodeau from the Knicks. I like what the Knicks are doing right now. I think they're getting a little guard heavy right now. I think that's because of some of the injuries they may have. But I think what you're seeing with Jalen Brunson, is just he's dominant with the ball right now. He's playing really, really at a high level, but he just joined the team this year a little bit, and I think there's just been a little bit too much of that guard play. I'm much more of a player that likes to see a nice balance in your offense, and right now watching the Knicks a little bit, to me, I apologize, but it's like watching paint on offense. Like watching paint dry. So in the 4 hole, we have Joe Mazzulla from the Celtics. Obviously got the nod when there became a controversy with the previous coach. Now has the job full time. I don't agree with that personally in terms of his experience and what he has as his head coaching cachet. I think right now, if you're watching the Celtics, I'm very concerned about them right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But in this series with Philadelphia, I'm a little concerned about them. They may be able to benefit from Philadelphia seemingly not being able to get out of their own way a little bit. Talk about that as well. In the West, I'm going to go with Michael Malone. Full disclaimer, know his dad from the days back in the Catholic High School League in New York. Used to hang out with a gentleman who I thought was maybe the greatest rebounder that I saw of all time, Harry Hart, who is the all-time rebound leader at Powell Memorial High School, despite the fact that there was the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Ed Searcy and some other great players that went there. Harry Hart was about 6'2", barrel-chested, played at Iona, and one of the greatest timing jumps that I've ever saw. When the ball came off the rim, we used to call him H. H was there. And so Michael Malone's done a great job with the Nuggets. I love the way their offense flows. They have good balance. They have Jokic, but now he's getting double-teamed, and they can go to Kevin Porter and Murray. They just have a lot of weapons. I think people have kind of underestimated them a little bit here, and I think they're doing pretty good. I like Steve Kerr with his offense. They spread the floor real well. I don't think right now what you're getting from them, though. I think you're getting, I'll say this a little bit, every dish has a little bit too much Curry in it right now for them. Steph Curry's dominating the ball, and I don't think there's a lot of flow to it. His shot selection also as of late, I mean, I know he can make some great shots and do a lot of great things, but his shot selection hasn't been great to me lately, and I don't see them having great flow to their team right now. They used to have great flow. I don't see it right now. But Monty Williams I have in the 3rd hole, and then I went with Vogel, who I think has a really tough job in the number 4 hole. When we put all of them together, we're talking about in the here, in the right now. I went with Michael Malone from the Denver Nuggets. I think he's done an absolute great job with his team. Number 2, we're going with Spoelstra, because I don't think there's too many teams that have made it out of play-in series and now have advanced and gone ahead. And I really, I know I'm going to make some of my New York fans back home unhappy with this comment, but the Knicks struggled with them in Game 2. They lost Game 1. They struggled with them in Game 2, and I think when they go back to Miami, the Knicks are in for a handful. I know that they have some injuries as well. The Heat with Oladipo and some other players, but Jimmy Butler right now is just crushing it. So I think they're in for a little bit of a problem there. I got Steve Kerr third overall, Monty Williams fourth. Then it drops off because there's only one Eastern coach that's in that group of four, in the first four, and that's Eric Spoelstra. And then I go to Rivers, Vogel, Thibodeau, and Mazzulla. I think the Celtics are at a huge disadvantage right now. I think everybody says, okay, we're going to give this young man an opportunity, give him a job, but I think maybe it was even unfair to Joe Mazzulla to put him into this situation because right now you're up against the best of the best. And I think that's it's showing a little bit. I don't like where the Celtics are as a team right now. And so we'll go into that a little bit right now. You have the Celtics and 76ers, kind of an anomaly of games because in Game 1, the 76ers did not have Joel Embiid. And obviously, he's the MVP of the league. And you would think, oh, my God, if they're not going to have the MVP of the league, they will absolutely struggle with the Celtics. In Game 1, they came out with James Harden, a different approach, a much more balanced attack than they do when Embiid is in there. And they absolutely throttled the Celtics in Game 1. Took Game 1 and took their home court advantage right there. Now Game 2 comes around, Joel Embiid comes back, and the MVP comes back, and the Celtics in Game 2 play a much better game, but absolutely throttle the 76ers in Game 2. So I don't know how sometimes you can explain that to me, even as a fan, a coach. You look at it and go, Joel Embiid, the MVP, he's a double-double machine. He's 6'10", he can shoot, he can pass, he can do all those great things, but they won convincingly without him. And then when he came back into the mix, and again, I'm just a guy who flies by the eye. I'm a guy that looks at this stuff, and I look at it and I go, wow, they're having some issues on this team because right now when he came back, it really coagulated things. It didn't make things better. It really slowed them down, I thought. Same thing going on with the Celtics right now. I don't know what's going on with them right now, but Jason Tatum seems to have not been his usual self, and right now their number one option is Jaylen Brown on offense, and I think that they're having some issues defensively as well inside, where that was the strength of their team with Williams and some of those other guys. They're having some problems. I think when Brogdon plays well, they're really good. He's their sixth man. When they come off the bench, he's really good. But I think they have some issues there too, because right now a team kind of falls back or has some struggles during the playoffs or runs into a really, really good opponent. You need to have some great coaching there. They need to have the confidence that their coach is just as good as the other coach, that their plays are just as good as the other plays, and that everything is moving to put them in the position best for them to succeed. Once the players start to feel that maybe that's not going on, they start to recede a little bit. And so I think a lot of people kind of diminish how difficult it is to actually coach basketball, and they take a lot of chances with people for good reasons. But then you're in that situation where now you have to play a playoff series, and Doc Rivers has a whole lot more experience than Joe Mazzulla does, and so does every single other coach in this bracket. So every step forward the Celtics take, they're going to have to, I think they're at a bit of a deficit there, and that's difficult. So I did take out a player from each team that I think is doing incredibly well. And right now it's not maybe the best player that you would think of the team, but this guy's stepped up in the playoffs and doing a really good job. So again, we went out on the Celtics. We'll go on the east side. We'll start there. I think Jaylen Brown's taken his game to an unbelievable level right now. He's playing great, shooting the ball well. He's become a guy that they can rely on when Tatum doesn't play well. I'm a little concerned about Jason Tatum right now. He does usually snap out of this, but he's had some funks here during the season. And I think if he funks out at the wrong time, the Celtics are in bad shape, because the Sixers are just really, really good and firing on all cylinders. And when you have Embiid and you have Harden as a 1-2 punch, whoever brings their 1-2 punch the best is going to win that series. So I think if Tatum doesn't step his game up, I think the Celtics are in for a long run. Okay, so in the 76ers vein, Embiid was hurt the first game. James Harden put on a show. He absolutely put on a show. Again, I think he dominates the ball too much. I think he's a guy that's going to hold on to it and turn the game into a one-on-one game, and he's very effective at doing that. I'm not sure it's the best for the team or the team approach, but he put on an absolute show and carried that team in Game 1. Came back with Embiid in Game 2. He didn't play as well, but I think that's because the big guy was back and he was deferring to him. The next young man is Jimmy Butler from the Miami Heat. This young man is absolutely on a tear. He is playing great. And one of the things I want to say to all of the young players out there, if you're looking to emulate someone, if you're looking for a hero, if you're looking for somebody who you think is a player that you want to talk about as this is the guy I want to be like, look at Jimmy Butler. Because Jimmy Butler will go out and score 40 points, and then they'll find him running the stairs in the arena right after the game. He'll be riding a bike somewhere after the game. His work ethic, his training ethic, and his approach to basketball is absolutely fabulous. I have him listed with the Heat, but when we coagulate this list and bring it all together, I think you're going to see that we think very, very highly of Jimmy Butler right now. I think he's terrific. For the Knicks right now, it's Jalen Brunson. I think it's too much. I think it's too much Jalen Brunson. He's dominating the ball. He's a very, very good offensive player. But at times I think the Heat have been able to put a bit of a clamp on him and been able to cover the pick and roll situations well. And again, I think if your point guard is your leading scorer, I don't think historically that's been great in basketball. I think you'd have to go back a long time to find when your point guard was your leading scorer and that team went all the way to the the NBA Finals or they're close by. I would say the closest thing you might have to that is Allen Iverson, going way back. So let's go over to the West Side. You have the Nuggets. I mean, Jokic is just, he's unbelievable. He's been dominant in the Suns series. They're up 2-0 right now because he's been dominant. He's also a player that makes impeccable decisions with the basketball. He gets off good shots. You don't see him take too many bad shots unless the shot clock's really down. And he makes really good decisions out of double teams because a lot of teams have taken to double team him now. And when they double team him, the Nuggets have some weapons. Porter, Murray, they have a lot of weapons right now. So I think people slept on the Denver Nuggets a little bit. I can see them getting out of the West and playing in the finals. For the Warriors, Steph Curry. But again, I said, if the dish has too much Curry, it's gonna throw off the taste a little bit. And I think that's what's going on right there. I think he feels he's in a situation where he has to carry the team, and I understand that. But his shot selection is not great right now for me, and I think he's put way too much of this on his own shoulders when there's some other really good players around him and some of the younger players that could have been brought along a little differently. I think Poole is an exceptional player there. They've kind of resisted him a little bit. I think he's really, really good player. They could bring him in. Wiggins has had some issues, but he's talented and very, very good as well. So I think that they could mix better. And I think that's on Kerr a little bit. I think that's on Steve Kerr a little bit. He was always a guard and a shooting coach, and that's good and everything like that. And him and Steph Curry have this symbiotic relationship. I believe it's unbelievable to watch. But right now the mix isn't good, and I think the Lakers are going to take care of them in this series. The Lakers, LeBron, he's got young legs right now. I don't know if anybody caught the dunk that he had in the game the other night, but he took it on the right side of the basket, came up on the other side of the basket. These young men are amazing with their athletic ability and their athleticism, some of the stuff they can do. But to come up on the other side of the basket and still be able to dunk the ball, I couldn't believe that. And I hadn't seen him bouncing around on the floor. I don't know if it was Dylan Brooks who got into his face during the series, which ignited him and kind of woke him up. I don't think that's it. I think he's a highly competitive individual, still one of the best players in the game. And I think right now, if they can keep Anthony Davis healthy, that 1-2 punch, like everybody's got that 1-2 punch we're talking about, you really like it if you have a 1-2-3, which I think the Nuggets have the 1-2-3. And so I thought the Suns did too, but they ran into the Nuggets. Right now, the Suns, Booker is playing tremendous, really, really good. I think Durant's been a little bit of a disappointment, especially on defense. I saw Jokic a couple of times around the basket, and Durant didn't even defend and didn't even try and get into the play. So I was just a little concerned about him. I think he's trying maybe not to get hurt. Offensively, Booker's going at such a high level clip that they don't need another addition like Kevin Durant out there, because Kevin Durant has trouble being effective in that situation because Booker really is the number one guy over there right now. I love the way he's playing. All right, so let's lock them all up. In the number one hole, I have LeBron James right now. He's playing at a high level. He's doing some great stuff. Number two is Jokic from the Denver Nuggets. He's just got so many weapons. I did when I wrote this, I switched it because I looked in and I said, let me take another look at this. I have Jimmy Butler in the 3-hole, but Jimmy Butler could be 1, 2, or 3. He's having a great series. He's emerged as an offensive juggernaut, and his work ethic is great. I love to see that. I love to see guys that are willing to work for what they want and then go get it. I love that about basketball. So then in the 4-hole, I have James Harden. He's playing great basketball right now, too. Not one of my favorite guys because he dominates and monopolizes the ball in order to be effective, but he's sensational. You have to give him credit. Booker over in Phoenix, could have swapped him and Harden right now, but I think Harden's just right at this moment playing a little bit better than him. I got Steph Curry in the 7-hole right now. And then I have Jaylen Brown and Brunson in the 7 and 8 for the Knicks. I think the Knicks offense is really stagnant, and if they can really, really get into it with the Heat really stifling the different options that they have, I think they're going to have a problem. One of the things that's just really, really, to me as a fan of the game, is I don't know why every single offensive play has to incorporate a high ball screen right now. We lived in basketball without pick and roll as part of an integral part of the offense for many, many years. It was always a little bit in there. You'd run some play on the side or you'd do a little bit of this and that. But right now, every single play has to been reduced to a high pick and roll. I think it's changed the game as well, too, because your big men aren't big men anymore. They're just high ball screen setters, and most of them don't shoot the ball well enough to step out and then be effective. So what they do is they just wind up trailing the play, offensive rebounders, and some of the great players that are low post players, or some of the guys around the basket right now. I'll call out DeAndre Ayton, name from the Suns, because I think he's dominant and really, really amazing player. But I think that they've gone away from that so much in the NBA that it's just, to me, it's a little mind-numbing. And then watching the games as I do, I really enjoy it. Last night they had the game on, and it was just one game on. I really enjoy it when there's just one game. When they have one game and then another game after that, it's okay. But sometimes on the weekends it's 1, 2, 3. Sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's Christmas Day, you might have 6 games on there. So just watching it over and over again, it reminds me that it's something that I like to take somewhat in small doses. And right now, again, you got a good game tonight because you got the Lakers and the Warriors, and it's the only game on. And so I think that's going to be a good one. So into the series right now, you have the Knicks and the Heat. They're tied at 1-1. The Knicks won on their home court the other night. But what they do in the playoffs is they assign home court advantage to one team or the other. You have a 7-game series. And so in your 7-game series, you have to establish home court advantage. And so the Knicks had home court advantage in this series. And what the Heat did was they broke their home court advantage by winning one of those games on their home floor. They took the first game, lost the second game, but the game was close. I think the Knicks are in trouble in this series. I love the Knicks. I'm originally from New York, but I think that they're in trouble in this series. Now we flip over to the 76ers, and we flip over to the Celtics. This, to me, is a toss-up. It's going to be really, really interesting to see which of these teams can emerge because their 1-2 punch has to come together. And right now, neither one is punching 1-2. They're kind of punching 1 and a little bit lazy with the 2. It can be Brown and Tatum. It doesn't matter, but they both have to play well for the Celtics to go. And then everybody else kind of goes off of that energy. And the same thing with the Sixers. It's got to be Embiid, and it's got to be Harden, but it's got to be in the flow of everything, and it can't be disruptive to the offense. So right there, I think that series could go down to 7 games, and I think it's going to be a really, really tough game, a tough series to call, and tough game by game. I think it's going to be rigorous. And the real question for the 76ers is Embiid going to remain healthy throughout the series? And if he does remain healthy, what does that do to the team? Because they look so much better in game 1 without him. And it was interesting. And then to close out, we're going to move over to the West Side just to finish here. How much time do you think we got, Pete?
About 11 minutes.
Oh, we got plenty of time. Okay, so we move over to the West Coast side. You have the Lakers and the Warriors, which I talked about this on last week's show. What a marquee matchup. What a great series for the NBA. And I think this is going to be a really, really interesting series. But if I looked at the way things were handled in game one, because also the Lakers were able to break the Warriors in game one. Their home court advantage is now broken because the Lakers were managed to take game one. And I think if anybody really wants to know, like, why I'm high on the Lakers right now, look at the last 10 games of their NBA season. Look at how they were playing basketball at the last part of the season. They were playing the best basketball in the NBA. And then I want you to look at what they did in the last game of their series previous to this. It was a game where they had to be eliminated or they were going to move forward. It was not which way they were going to go. They came out and won that game by 40 points. So I'm really excited about the Lakers right now. I think they're doing good stuff. The Warriors, I think, are in trouble a little bit. Excuse me. And then when you get to the Suns and the Nuggets, to be honest, I'm surprised at how well the Nuggets have handled the Suns. And I think sometimes everybody thinks all you have to do is coagulate and accumulate a bunch of superstar players, put them on the same team, and it'll work. And so if you look at the New Jersey Nets, they had Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. It didn't work. And now you have this where they're trying to do it in season. The Phoenix Suns, a little bit of desperation, I thought, on their part. They went and they made a move for Kevin Durant, brought in Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant wound up getting hurt, has been hobbled a little bit by injury later down the year. But he's not the same player that he was at that time. And so if you're bringing in Kevin Durant to be that same player, I think you miscalculated on that. I think Devin Booker's their guy. I think Ayton's a tremendously great talent, and I think they could have kept riding that way. I think this has been disruptive, and the Nuggets have the vibration and the energy right now that I think is significant. And so what happens in these series and how do we move forward? You know, who's going to come out and be in the finals? So I expect the Miami Heat to take out the Knicks. I think the Heat right now are playing at a very high level as a team. I think they're well coached, and I think they have this underdog mentality because they had a play-in game. They wound up winning the play-in game, winning their first series, which is anomalous to NBA playoff structure. It doesn't happen a whole lot, if it ever happens at all. And I think they're kind of playing with that rhythm right now, that swagger, as they say in the NBA. So I expect them to beat the Knicks, unfortunately. I think the Knicks have come to a grinding halt offensively. Some of the injuries that they've had have been significant and have slowed them down. But they just don't have the offensive weapons that the other teams in this group have. And so if I'm ranking them as far as where I see them as the other teams, I don't see them advancing out of this round. And if they were fortunate to advance out of this round, I don't see how they would be successful on the other side versus the 76ers or the Celtics. And so I kind of alluded to that last week where I thought the Celtics and the 76ers game was more of a championship vibe to it. It was more of a these are the two teams you wanted to see, and we talked about where that was on the West Coast as well too.
Yep.
But I don't really have a prediction in this one, but I do think that the Celtics aren't playing real right now. They've broken their home court advantage. When they get back to Philadelphia, I'd be interested to see how it goes. But I see this one going 7, coming down to the very end. But I don't like the way things are going with the Celtics right now, so I'm going to go with the 76ers there. I know I'm going to draw a lot of slack here from people, but we try and call it like we see it right now. I love the Celtics and I love the Knicks, and I'd love for them to advance and move on. But if you're asking me in a practical sense what I'm seeing on the television right now and where these teams are culminating into the end of their season, I think that's what you watch, and there's a wave that you can ride. I think Miami's riding that wave a little bit, and the Knicks are going to get caught underneath it. There's nobody riding a wave in the other games. It's just going to be knock down, drag out, and I think that's going to be a significant amount of wear and tear on both of those teams. And I think you're going to see the Miami Heat. I said this to somebody at the lunch table the other day. I think you're going to see the Miami Heat come out of the East Coast and play in the finals. That's my prediction right now. Nobody thought that they were coming out, and I really I think they're going to come out and play, and I think they're going to be formidable coming forward because they have a guy, Jimmy Butler, right now that can really, really torch you, and he can just ruin your defense with his offensive ability. So, and his work ethic is tremendous. So I think that's the way things are going to set up on that side. When we get over to the West, I think the Suns right now have gotten really bad news on their point guard, Chris Paul. He is out for at least 3 games now. And if you're looking at 3 games when you're down 2-0, that could be the lifetime. And so right now they're down 2-0. Denver, we talked about this in the previous show. Denver right now is looking for some rest time. They're looking for some respite time, some repair time. And what does that mean? If they can finish the Suns in 4 games and the Lakers and Warriors wind up going to 7, that's going to create at least a week where they don't have anything to do. That's going to create at least 5 to 7 days. And at this time of the year, especially with a team that might be a little bit more veteran or with players that have logged significant minutes over the years, Jokic, Porter, Murray, those players have logged significant minutes over the years. Any kind of rest is a good thing. Where you find that as a coach, though, too much rest is a bad thing. You don't want to be off for a really, really long extended period of time, because then you kind of lose your ability to compete. You lose your ability to be sharp, and then it takes a little time to build that back up. But if you're trying to build that back up during a 7-game series in the finals, that's not going to go too well. So I think that's a delicate balance. And then when you have that off time, what do you do with that off time is critical. I think that's where coaching's really going to come into this. But I'm going to pick the 76ers over on that side. I'm going to pick the Heat over on that side. Nuggets, I think, are going to take them in 4. I think they're going to want the rest. I think they're going to know that they have a formidable opponent on the other side, whoever comes out of that other series. I think they're going to want the prep time as well. And they have a fairly young team, so I think they'll be fairly responsive to this. But anytime you can finish somebody as fast as you can finish them, the race is to get to 4 games. And as fast as you can get to 4 games, that's the best way for your team to operate. Now, then you have to mitigate some of the rest periods and different stuff like that. You don't want to get stale. But I think if you were presented with most NBA coaches and you said, okay, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to be locked up in a series for 7 games where your players have to play extensive minutes, or would you prefer to finish somebody off in 4 games and then have to mitigate those rest periods and make sure your team didn't get stale? I think every single coach in the league most likely is going to take the 4-game sweep, because you get done with it. And then if you win in 7 games, man, you've taken quite a toll. That's 3 extra games. You know, that's over 140 minutes more than your opponent that you've played. So it's significant. So I'm going to take the Nuggets on that side. I think they're going to get ready to be going on their opponent on the other side. I'm taking the Lakers over the Warriors as well. Warriors have home court advantage. The Lakers broke that. I expect that the Lakers are going to play really, really well at home. I don't know that they have enough weapons to go with the other complementary players that they have. But Reeves is playing okay right now. I'm not in love with him as a like a third wheel, but he can shoot the ball. He can stretch the defense, and that's really. As you saw when you had Michael Jordan, you need a dead-eye shooter next to a great player like that so that you can stretch the defense. Steve Kerr and John Paxson were those guys for Michael Jordan. I think you have a similar situation here where you need that really, really good shooter to keep people away from LeBron, because when you get LeBron in that one-on-one coverage, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. So we are on the wind down, Pete, and we are in the fastest hour in Western Massachusetts, perhaps the fastest hour in the nation.
Got about 2 minutes.
Got 2 minutes. So I'm going to give you our
2-minute drill.
I'm going to give you our 2 songs
Okay.
for the week. First one is Please Don't Go by Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Good tune.
Okay, it's a good tune. I'm going to put it out there because I know that my wife loves that song, and we're going to put it out there. And the next one is Fleetwood Mac, Blue Letter. Love both of those songs. I think that if you're up in the morning and you pop those on, that'll get you moving. That'll get your rhythm going. That'll get your vibration going. And as we go in Hoopland, folks, we're going to continue with the draft. We're going to continue with the combines. Into next week, we're going to be hot. We're going to be rolling around and getting everything ready for you. The finals will be coming up in the NBA. It's an exciting time in basketball land. I really do appreciate all of the interest we've gotten in the show, all of the people tuning in, all of the people who've been wishing us well. And we couldn't have done it without Pete. And I also did want to say that there was an accusation and an allegation leveled against me last week in the zone that I had misappropriated some seltzer. So I'm pleading guilty on air. And I did want to announce to Mr. Ken Stomsky that his closet is now full of seltzer. and we're ready to rock and roll. I enjoyed watching his show last week. I love watching the young people when they're playing their instruments on Channel 15. And want to thank everybody here for helping us get this together. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. And remember, we're in the zone.